Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the second week of our course on business process modeling and analysis. In this week, we'll be covering basic business process modeling. 6 video clips will be provided this week. The first one deals with fundamentals of modeling languages. The second one looks at process activities in BPMN. The third one looks at gateways, the exclusive gateway and the parallel gateway, both in their split variant and in the join variant. Video clip 2.4 looks at inclusive gateways, also at loops. 2.5 at start events and end events of process models, and 2.6 covers intermediate events. All right. So, basic business process modeling. Business process models are abstract representations of originals with the feature mapping, abstraction, and pragmatics. This is what we learned last week when we were discussing the properties of models from the modeling theory. And here we have an example of a business process model that specifies what are the activities we need to perform in order to process an insurance claim. And this process model is an abstract representation of the process as it runs in the insurance company, because only the main activities are shown here. And also certain things are abstracted from, so maybe activities that are not so important are abstracted from. If I need to copy something, if I need to put, let's say, documents from one office to another office, these types of activities are abstracted from here, for instance. But it still covers the pragmatics, because I can use this process model instead of the original process, which is really not easy to grasp if you don't have a model representation for it. So, putting it the other way around, business process modeling languages need to express exactly what we like to represent in business process models. So, these languages need to provide language constructs to represent the important aspects of business process models. In general, business processes languages consist of concepts and their relationships. So that's a very, let's say, fundamental finding. So whenever we encounter a language, the language contains concepts and their relationship. And this is also called the abstract syntax of the language. Then we need to express the concepts of the language. And in order to do that, we need something called a concrete syntax, or the notation. And finally, the elements, the concepts, need to have a meaning. And that is the semantics of the language. I could spend almost a week to discuss all these things in a lot of detail, but in the context of this course, I like to informally introduce to you the concepts of abstract syntax, concrete syntax, or notation and semantics. So the first thing is abstract syntax. So what are the concepts and the relationships that we find now in business process modeling languages? And if I look in this example, we see, well, there are a number of concepts that are provided by the language. One concept is the concept of the activity. So activity is a concept that is available in the language, and that makes sense because we need to model activities in organizations as part of business processes. And this concept is used here 4 times, right? So we have 4 activities. So the concept of an activity is used 4 times in this process model. What is the other concept? The other concept is a sequence flow. We need to have ordering, execution ordering. That's the second concept. The second concept in the context of the abstract syntax. Then we have, so sequence flow is what you see here. Then you see the gateway. There is one gateway. That's a decision point or a point where concurrency starts. And we have events. This is 4 events. So in order to capture business processes, we at least need the following concepts, and that is the activity, sequence flow, gateway, and the event. And these are elements of the abstract syntax. So there is something like an activity, there is something like a sequence flow, there is something like a gateway, and there is also something like an event. But now we need to have ways to express that. And of course, it is already expressed in this slide, and that's also part of the language. I could use any symbol to describe an activity. I could use many different symbols to describe sequence flow, gateways, and events. But the language comes with a notation, and the notation is what you see here. So that activities are represented by rectangles with a rounded edge. So that sequence flow is represented by an edge. So that gateways are represented by this diamond-shaped symbol, and events are represented by a circle. So could we create a language with the same concept and a different notation? Yes, we could do that. So let's try to do that. But before we try to do that, I briefly like to say something about the semantics. We will discuss semantics of modeling, of process models throughout this course. So, and we already did. So the semantics is of a language is the meaning of the elements that we see here. So the meaning of an activity stands for something, an activity you conduct during the operational business that takes time and that is performed by resources, by roles in the organization. So all these elements have a semantics, and also the process as a whole has a semantics, and that is the execution semantics. So by sequence flow, we can specify the order in which the activities have to be executed. And using the decisions, for instance, we can also have alternative paths that are executed here. So the semantics is basically the execution semantics that is specified by the process model. All right, but now we wanted to create a language with the same concept and a different notation. Okay, so let's try to do that using the pen. We could say that we use the triangle for an event, this ellipse for an activity, and this box for a decision. Then we could draw the same process model in a different notation, so it has the same concept, the same abstract syntax. These are the three elements that we have here, plus the sequence flow. Let's do the sequence flow the same as before. And now I can start drawing this process model in our new notation. So that starts with an event. I'm not writing this because that's too much complexity here for this slide. Then we have an activity that is register claim. Then we have an activity that is decide on claim coverage. Forget this plus symbol for the time being. Then we have a decision. Decision is something like that. Then I have another activity, and here I have another event, and that could be the model as I have. Yeah, but the question is that a good idea or is it not a good idea? Well, I think it's not a good idea because a standard for concepts and notation eases communication. And therefore, it's not only the abstract syntax or the elements that is specified by BPMN, for instance, but also the notation that makes it easy to understand a model that other people have created. All right, that brings us to the BPMN, to the Business Process Model and Notation. We will be discussing version 2 of this industry standard. It's an industry standard by the Object Management Group. In previous versions, the acronym spelled out to Business Process Modeling Notation. Version 2 changed also this, but I think it's fine to say any of these two or just say BPMN. It is an expressive modeling language, expressive process modeling language, but also quite a flexible one. It allows to use different sets of modeling concepts. So we can start with a minimal set of modeling concepts and create already quite meaningful process models. BPMN focuses on operational business processes. So it is not suited for process landscapes, for organizational structure, also not for data structure and for IT infrastructures. Therefore, in most projects, other modeling languages will complement BPM to express things like process landscapes, organization, data structure, IT infrastructure, for instance. There are a number of notation categories of BPMN, and this is these 4 categories. 3 of them we will be discussing this week. And so one is the flow objects. So these are the objects that can be embedded in the flow of the process. There are artifacts that represent additional information that is useful in the process. There are connecting objects. These connecting objects can connect flow objects, not all flow objects, but specific connection rules apply here. And also later we discuss swim lanes. This is grayed out here. We will not look at swim lanes in this week. We will come to this later. In particular, we look at events, activities, and gateways related to flow objects. We look at annotations regarding artifacts, and we look at sequence flow regarding connecting objects. And that concludes video clip 2.1, where we discussed fundamentals of modeling languages. We were discussing what an abstract syntax of a language is. We also discussed what the concrete syntax or notation of a language is. We briefly sketched what execution semantics is. We will come to semantics of a process model throughout this course. And we talked a little bit about BPMN as the industry standard for business process modeling.